Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Chris.
Good morning. It's 10:45, so I'd like to call the meeting to order, if I may, and thank you all for being here and joining our beloved community by this wonderful technological achievement of Zoom. And just as a technical reminder, please keep your microphones muted unless you want the whole group to hear you. Maybe you do, but maybe you don't want us to hear your phone ringing or your dog. But anyway, I'm Chris Bailey, and I'm a member of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Manhattan. I like to volunteer for Happy Kitchen when that happens, and I'm privileged to be your convener this morning. So welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Manhattan. We welcome all with a warm heart and an open mind. Whatever your religious background or lack thereof, whatever your job or your past, whatever your race, gender, age, whether you're gay, straight, or bi, whether you're able-bodied or physically challenged, you are welcome. And I extend the warmest welcome to any visitors or guests that we have. If you're new to UUFM or don't have any formal connection to us, you can go to uufm.net and click on Connect at the top right-hand side. Or if you prefer a more personal connection, you can direct chat during the service with our greeter, Shirley Hobrock, who's probably on the screen as Shirley and Bryce. And we're glad you're here with us. And now we'll have the opening hymn from our music director, Renee Brown. Please feel free to sing along, but to avoid audio lag and feedback, please keep your microphones muted. The hymn is number 134, Our World is One. Rev Jonalu Johnstone will light our chalice while I read some words from the Reverend Dr. David Breeden. May I be all in for beloved community. May I be all in despite the challenges. May I be all here for beloved community. May I be ready for the beauty because I long for the possibilities. Yes, I'm here for beloved community. May I see the beauty of you in community, of us in community. May we be the beauty of beloved community. May we be the dream together. We join here for beloved community. And one of the ways we can reflect our own beloved community is to participate in the breakout rooms, just to check in briefly with one another, since we're separated in body, but not in spirit. When prompted, please touch or click the join button that will appear on your screen. Your microphone will be muted when you get there, so don't forget to unmute. I'd like to share a reading by Andrea Hawkins Kemper called Blessed Are We. Blessed are we who gather with open hearts together in this space today. Blessed are we, the chalice lighters of resistance, justice, love, and faith. Blessed are we, the heretics, the outcasts, the walkers of our own way. Blessed are we, the border crossers, the refugees, the immigrants, the poor, the wanderers who are not lost. Blessed are we, the transgressors, the trespassers, the passers-by, the cause takers, the defiant, the compliant. Blessed are we, the hand extenders, the sign makers, the protesters, and the protectors. Blessed are we, the trans women, the trans men, the non-binary, the cisgender, the multigender, and the no gender. Blessed are we, the friend, the stranger, the lonely, the hidden, the visible, the authentic. Blessed are we who rise in solidarity. Blessed are we who cannot. Blessed are we who do not. Blessed are we, for this is our beloved community. This is who we are.
Welcome to PV Storytime, children's books read aloud. Be Kind by Pat Zietlow Miller, illustrated by Jen Hill.
So there was a young person who is trying very hard to do what everyone should do all the time. Our offering is a sign and symbol of our uniting together. Because we offer to this fellowship our time, treasure, and talent, we're able to do more together than we could ever do alone. In that spirit, we'll now receive your offering. You may make your gift via our website to support the congregation's general operating fund, our blessing box, or our Helping Hands Fund. This month's Helping Hands recipient is the Kansas Abortion Fund. And this is also our opportunity to submit our joys and concerns, which Rev Jonalu will read following the offertory. Please let us know what's on your mind. If you don't wish for it to be read aloud, please just say so in your comment, and likewise if you would like it omitted from the weekly email. The offertory will be performed by our own Renee Brown.
This week, we keep in our hearts and minds those particularly in Texas who continue suffering from the results of the cold weather snap that we all endured. We're grateful for some sun and warmth, though we might not have it all today. I've adapted these words from Martha Capo. There are those among us who have endured a loss in the past week. May their hope be uplifted again in this community of faith. May they find renewed strength. There are those among us who have wrestled with questions that seem to have no answer this past week. May they find sanctuary in this community of faith. And there are those among us who have cherished an unexpected joy in this past week. May their gladness be celebrated. Rob DeLong notes that in the New York Times today, there was a dot plot, continuing dots for every person who has lost their life due to COVID. It was humbling. And I noticed a lot of conversation before we came into this service among people who are getting COVID vaccines, and we rejoice with them at the same time that our hearts break for those who have suffered so much with COVID. As we commit to continue our free and responsible search for truth, may we covenant to honor the many paths, the many joys and sorrows that connect us to this community and beyond. We build community here amongst ourselves. Yet how might that extend to building community throughout the world? In the last chapter of his last book, Martin Luther King Jr. writes about the world house this way. Some years ago, a famous novelist died. Among his papers was found a list of suggested plots for future stories, the most prominently underscored being this one. A widely separated family inherits a house in which they have to live together. This is the great new problem of humankind. We have inherited a large house, a great world house, in which we have to live together, Black and white, Easterner and Westerner, Gentile and Jew, Catholic and Protestant, Muslim and Hindu, a family unduly separated in ideas, culture, and interest, who, because we can never again live apart, must learn somehow to live with each other in peace. So wrote Dr. King in 1967. The challenge of looking forward to a beloved community may parallel the challenge of looking forward to heaven. It can become in our minds an inevitability, something that will happen simply because we believe it will happen. It won't. Maybe it's not even necessary to say that now, as we recognize the strength of racism and the determination of vigilantes and nationalists to pursue a path that deliberately excludes those not like them. How do we create beloved community in a world with such strains, divisions, and hatred? Beloved community is an ideal that feels impossible. Dr. King thought we could achieve it. He saw colonialism breaking down as countries in Asia and Africa became independent from their colonizers. He saw growing awareness of globalism, though that was still only a little glint in many leaders' eyes. He believed we were on the threshold of a new world. Decades later, I'm not so sure. I see the persistence of the colonialist attitudes, though few colonies remain. Misogyny, racism, homophobia, and transphobia are all alive and well. Nationalism eclipses world community. On the other hand, I have had glimpses of beloved community. The reason we can believe in any kind of beloved community is that we have caught sight of it. Something that's deeper than regular community, a moment when differences knit us together instead of driving us apart. when the feeling of love deepens and collides in such a way that we know we are bound to one another. The times, in my experience, do not last long, but they quench such a deep thirst that I know there's something profound and vital worth working for, if ever we could attain it. Beloved community comes only in moments, in glimpses. For example, Nancy Palmer Jones writes in her book, Mistakes and Miracles, a book she co-wrote with Karen Lynn, about the congregation she serves, First Unitarian Church of San Jose, California, a congregation with a well-established Spanish-speaking ministry, which nevertheless struggles with identity and conflict. Their vision, the vision of the First Unitarian Church of San Jose, has been articulated as one congregation in two languages. Nancy writes, "What keeps us going are the sparkling moments when we embody this vision. On one Sunday morning, we welcome 10 congregants into membership. Exactly half of this new member cohort is primarily Spanish speaking, the other half primarily English speaking. Some 20 congregational leaders join the new members for an early breakfast. The fireside room is crowded with tables. A babble of Spanish and English fills the air, and I am so proud. The numbers aren't huge, but they are equal. It feels like an enormous success, a symbol of what we are creating. A symbol of what we are creating." We live in those symbols sometimes. I've had my own such experiences. For many years, I volunteered at the Michigan Women's Music Festival, a gathering of thousands of women, mostly lesbians, where we created the whole world, everything. We built stages and showers and paths through the woods. We drove buses to transport people, collected trash, took care of children, cooked and served meals, put together workshops, did light and sound for women who played and sang all kinds of music. An amazing enterprise. And every year, some sort of community conflict arose, some issue. And the beautiful thing was, it was not ignored or swept under a rug. We dealt with it by talking it out together in community. Michigan was where I first had serious anti-racism training. We had supports like a camping area for women with disabilities, counseling area for women who needed support. We paid attention to the differences among us and made it work for everyone. Until finally, it didn't. And that was in part because of controversy around transgender people. The question was, who belongs? Can we be inclusive? And we failed that test. Glimpses. We get glimpses of beloved community. I've seen it in the Poor People's Campaign and in congregations. It's not all peace and quiet necessarily. It is acknowledging our differences, dealing openly with them, and making accommodations for everyone, honoring everyone's needs, taking seriously everyone's ideas and feelings. Not easy. What I've decided is that we don't get there by simply setting goals and working hard. Goals can be helpful to articulate where we are going and push us towards something. However, I believe we can get there only by living as if we were already there. And by that, I don't mean to deny the reality of white supremacy, patriarchy, poverty, homophobia, and other forms of oppression. Rather, imagine, how would you act if you were in a beloved community? What would you do if everyone's voice was being honored? I take as a guide the womanist theologian Bell Hooks in a brilliant essay, Love as the Practice of Freedom. Hooks insists that love is the only way we can end the politics of domination. We see over and over how communities, even political communities that are working to overcome some form of oppression, end up oppressing others. Lesbian women who excluded transgender people. Black men in the civil rights struggle denying women a role. Jews who survived the Holocaust taking over homes and lands of Palestinians. Hooks puts it this way: often the longing is not for a collective transformation of society, an end to the politics of domination, but rather simply for an end to what we feel is hurting us. So somehow we have to overcome the lure of our self-interest to stop oppression of everyone, of people other than ourselves. We have to pretend we are not in a world where we have to look out for ourselves alone, ourselves first and foremost. And Hooks says the only answer is love, a fully developed ethic of love, because she is an ethicist. Love as a choice, not as an emotion. We cannot ignore power, certainly, but without love, power will devolve into violence. We can't wait for love to come as it comes. We can't even desire to love. We have to make a choice to love. Hooks says, the moment we choose to love, we begin to move against domination, against oppression. The moment we choose to love, we start to move toward freedom, to act in ways that liberate ourselves and others. That action is the testimony of love as the practice of freedom. Of course, it's easier said than done, especially if we are talking about loving everyone. Dr. King reminded us back in 1957 that Jesus didn't say, like your enemies, because there's some folks we're never going to like. We can, though, choose to love. We can imagine them as precious children of the universe or children of God. We can imagine them as the insecure, vulnerable humans that they are, because we are all insecure, vulnerable humans. I grant you, it's not easy, especially when they have hurt us or people who we do love, and even people who we like. But as Hooks and King taught us, we choose to love. We begin to move against domination and move toward freedom. If we move toward loving those who hate us, we free ourselves from them. They no longer control us. And part of what creates beloved community is over and over again choosing love, choosing what is good for the community, even if it's over our self-interests. Here are words from Dr. King. The world in which we live is geographically one, and now we must make it spiritually one. Through our scientific genius, we have made of the world a neighborhood. Now, through our moral and spiritual genius, we must make of it a brotherhood. We must live together as brothers, as sisters, as siblings, I might say, and come to see that we are all involved in a single process. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. If we accept that what affects one affects all, we begin to know that to love ourselves, we must love one another. We have to stay awake, though, because the forces of domination and violence continue to push against us, both externally and internally, in our own minds and hearts. We've learned so well the ways of racism, the ways of patriarchy, the ways of capitalism, the ways of individualism, the ways of colonialism. We believe they are normal. We have to continually monitor ourselves for the ways that those show, and we have to monitor our world for them, all at the same time that we're simply trying to live our lives. And that sounds overwhelming. So we have to do what we can. Here's advice from a Muslim text, the 40 Hadith of An-Nawawi, Hadith 34. Whoever among you sees evil, let him change it with his hand. If he's unable to do so, then with his tongue. And if he's unable to do so, then with his heart. If you see evil, whether it be in the world or in yourself, do what you can to change it. Physically, verbally, and emotionally in your heart. It really does start with be kind. As we heard in this morning's story, the poor child trying to figure out how to be kind. We all recognize that struggle. As we also heard, it is so much harder than simply stopping the evil. For one thing, we have to recognize what is important. Leo Tolstoy, a great proponent of nonviolence, in addition to having written a couple of novels, told a story about how to know what's most important. This was his story, reworded. So a king had many distractions and demands put on him. And he wanted to know what to pay attention to. So he developed 3 questions. How can I do the right thing at the right time? Who do I need to pay attention to? And what's the most important thing to give my attention? And after much confusing advice from many different people, he went to a hermit who was known for his wisdom. The king dressed simply and left his bodyguard a distance behind him. He found the hermit digging garden beds in front of his modest hut. And he asked his 3 questions. How do I do the right thing at the right time? Who do I need to pay attention to? And what's the most important thing to give my attention? The hermit kept digging. He was not a young man, and the king could tell he was tired from the way he breathed and moved. And finally, the king could not bear to watch. Let me dig a while, said the king. You're tired. Thank you, said the hermit, and handed the king his shovel. And when 2 garden beds had been finished, the king asked his questions again, and again the hermit ignored him. The king was ready to leave, disappointed. But a man came running. He was bleeding, pressing in on his stomach, and when he came to the king, he fell at his feet, moaning. Well, the king and the hermit worked together to tend the wound. The king washed it and bandaged it, and as the wounded man recovered a little, he was thirsty. So the king fetched water for him. And as the day cooled, the king and the hermit moved the man indoors to the bed. And unused to all this physical labor, the king soon fell asleep himself. When he and the man awoke the next morning, the wounded person begged, "Forgive me." "Why?" exclaimed the king. "You've not offended me in any way." "Ah, you don't know me. You executed my brother, and I swore to avenge his death. I came across your bodyguard who recognized me and gave me this wound. I wanted to kill you, and you saved me from death. I will be your faithful servant if you will forgive me." And so they made peace with one another, and the king found the hermit again outdoors. sowing seeds in the newly turned earth. "Will you answer my questions now?" asked the king. "They've been answered," said the hermit. "What?" Well, the hermit explained what had happened the day before. "If you had not helped me dig these beds, the man would have attacked you and you would have regretted not staying with me. The most important time was when you were digging the beds. I was the most important person, and helping me was your most important business. But when that man came here, the most important time was when you nursed him. For if you'd not bound up his wounds, he would have died without having made peace with you. So he was the most important person, and what you did for him was the most important business. Remember then that there is only one time that is important: now. It's the most important time because it's the only time when we have any power. The most important person is who is with you. And the most important thing is to do good for that person, because that is why we are here on earth." That's Tolstoy's story. A similar message, a true one, comes from Martin Luther King. "Two men," he writes, "flew to Atlanta to confer with a civil rights leader at the airport. Before they could begin to talk, the porter sweeping the floor drew the local leader aside to talk about a matter that troubled him. After 15 minutes had passed, one of the visitors said bitterly to his companion, 'I am just too busy for this kind of nonsense. I haven't come 1,000 miles to sit and wait while he talks to a porter.' The other replied, 'When the day comes that he stops having time to talk to a porter, on that day I will not have the time to come 1 mile to see him.'" Beloved community includes everyone and requires consideration for everyone. In beloved community, there are no ranks based on position or wealth, much less racial, gender, or sexual identities. I appreciate that my parents taught me to treat everyone with respect, that janitors and checkout clerks were real people, and so were the people who we might be intimidated by, the school principals and town officials. We may not find beloved community by being kind to everyone, extending love to everyone, but we are certain never to find beloved community without extending kindness and love to everyone. Will we get there? Maybe we will only ever get glimpses. But maybe the glimpses are enough. As Rabbi Tarfon taught in the Mishnah, it is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. May we ever strive to extend love and kindness to all, that someday we may find ourselves in beloved community. At this point, I invite conversation, discussion. I think Chris is going to moderate a little bit for us. Maybe he'll begin by reading Anna's comment in the chat.
I'd be happy to once I get there. Anna says that we are, in fact, not in a world where we have to look out for only ourselves. The way in which we treat everyone is the way in which anyone is the way that we treat everyone, including ourselves. The more we choose to work to find understanding in our hearts for those whom we think are the worst, the more we draw close to loving our enemy. It is the only way. Don't close your heart to those whom you think are too ignorant, too evil, too selfish for you to understand.
She's got some questions here then too. How do we learn to understand the Capitol insurrectionists? Have you ever?
Oh,
yeah.
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah. Have you ever believed passionately in something and learned later that your belief was misplaced? Yeah, I think the only way that I can deal with that is to recognize the people who I love who don't believe the same way I do. And it's really hard. But I can love them even if I think they're wrong. Very hard. I agree. If there's anyone who would like to comment, you can put something in the chat or tell us in the chat that you want to talk. And
Lauren Clement says that being humble is also key. Well, which I think was amply demonstrated by your reference to Martin Luther King Jr. Being not too proud to talk to a porter, somebody who's essentially a servant.
Do you want to say more about that, Lauren?
Well, I'm thinking about some of my relatives who, in New York, for example, was a very powerful person in Buffalo and chaired the prison system. He was very wealthy, but he would always stop and thank people in hotels and extend his hand to people that, when I was young and traveling with him, just really struck me that, you take care of everybody. No matter what your position is in society. Just an example.
Yeah, yeah. I think Sabrina wants to say something.
I was talking to my doctor back in firstly, I put in there, I think that President Trump wanted to stay in presidency because of his, the fact that he will probably go to jail and be broke and all that. He's never had that issue before. My psychiatrist told me of a story where Donald Trump had a flat tire and some guy came over and helped him fix the flat, change the tire on him. He said, anything I can do for you? And he said, no, don't worry about it. He said, no, seriously. And he said, well, can you send some flowers to my wife? So Donald Trump got the address, and they got the flowers with a card that says, but basically their mortgage had been paid off. So he's not completely evil, I guess, but maybe fear influences his behavior. Could that be it?
I think fear is one of those things that certainly makes people act in ways that they wouldn't otherwise. I know that I'm not at my best when I'm afraid.
Michael Oldfather would like to contribute.
Yeah, I have been puzzling over what makes me and the people I mostly know and live with and interact with are so different from the people who voted for Trump and the people who attacked the Capitol. One piece of it I think I understand a bit, and that is the the role of white males who do not have college degrees. And I look back on the stretch of time between, say, the late 1980s, early in that era, how they've taken things on, have had such a hard time keeping up with the rest of us, or who have college degrees and so on. And that is that during that period of time, labor unions, through a variety of actions, public and private, labor unions just really cratered to a small portion of what they were. Manufacturing was affected by three things. One is that productivity greatly increased. And so things that used to take, say, 40 workers now required 5 or 10. So then we also increased, trade liberalization occurred. And all of these things together have left the sons of the labor union members and the people in manufacturing, left them without a logical place to go. And they really have been greatly affected by the change in income and wealth for a generation of white men who don't have college degrees. And so I'm trying to think, how can I get the president to come up with some kind of sneaky ways to be, it doesn't have to be sneaky, but ways to expand opportunities and to train people for jobs that do exist that could be done without a college education. It just, to me, it's one piece of the story. And I suffer from being an economist, and I just do the best I can.
Yeah, I was someone on the news or somewhere was talking about that President Biden has an idea of sort of reviving Depression era civil conservation corps and infrastructure to address climate change and so forth. And so some's come up with some sort of that kind of program that existed back in the New Deal. And I found that kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And I just want to jump in. Rob DeLong says, and I can sympathize, I think sometimes for me, it helps having family members who, while not capital insurrectionists, certainly identify with those beliefs. They're still family.
Yes.
I think my first step in dealing with that phenomenon is my casually racist uncles, who are not horrible, demonic people. They have a lot of qualities, but you have to just bear in mind that you're related to those folks. And Rob DeLong, I think, had a comment. I'm sorry, that was Rob DeLong. And I think Kathy and Dan Swinson had a question, at least.
Yeah, how does this relate to how we talk about politicians whose policies hurt so many people? And, I learned something very valuable when I was working with people with severe behavior problems who were developmentally disabled. Because what I learned was to separate the behavior from the person. So, separate the behavior from the person. If the politician's behavior is creating policies that are destructive, we name that. We don't shy away from naming that is problematic and all the ways in which it's problematic, but we don't call them names. We don't attack them, physically. We are still respectful, even though we call out the behavior.
Yeah.
And Sylvia would like to add a comment.
And this will probably be the last comment.
I lived next door for over 40 years to our neighbors. We always vote exactly opposite on everything. And after doing the controversy about this election, I was talking to my neighbor guy, and I said, gosh, just knowing you keeps me from hating all Republicans. And he said, we feel the same way. And then we keep engaging each other, and they asked us to transcribe some music that he found that his great uncle wrote or something. So we're working on a surprise for them. But just like being like intimate, we used to garden together at the community garden. We shared a garden, and just having contact with them, just knowing them gives me a different insight on the broader group of people like them. And also, I heard this thing on the radio, but I was troubled that there was a big controversy that Laura Kelly tried to follow CDC recommendations on the priority of people getting COVID shots, and up high on the list were people who are incarcerated or people in mental institutes. And people made a big, horrible stink about that. And then on the radio yesterday, there was a story about people in San Quentin. Oh my God, it would break your heart. Over a third of them became infected. They were just lying there in their beds, just dying. They just could not be taken care of. Well, anyway.
I actually have a friend who was in prison and got COVID there. He's okay now, and he's in a halfway house, but yeah, it's a horrible place to get COVID.
Our closing hymn is 1051, We Are.
We shall overcome. When we truly celebrate the diversity of contributions and talents offered by all people, we shall overcome hatred and prejudice and oppression. When we can truly extend our hands to one another in loving acceptance, we shall overcome the past that haunts us now. Living in freedom and peace, we shall overcome the wrongs that have happened and the debts left unpaid. Let us join together in that commitment to overcome. Let us say together, Amen. And we are at the end of our service. I invite you to stay and socialize with whoever turns up in the coffee and conversation breakout room, and look forward to wisdom